Greetings, cardboard architects. Greetings, cardboard architects. Greetings, cardboard architects. Greetings, cardboard architects. I think I'm comfortable with what I've got on now. Today I thought I'd share with you my Derevi commander deck. This is a deck that's based around the Merfolk Looter effect, which is to say centrally around Merfolk Looter. So the deck packs a lot of different looter cards, from Reckless Scholar to Cephalid Broker to Merfolk Looter itself. So the deck centers around that theme and has lots of synergy in that regard, as you'll see. So I guess I'm just going to go through and talk about the deck. I've split it into a couple different sections that kind of make sense and will help you understand the deck and what my idea behind it was when I built it. So my commander is Derevi, and of course Derevi is a very good commander and is banned in French commander. However, I play almost exclusively multiplayer games, and besides that, this deck is nowhere near overpowered or abusive or anything like that. The most damage my Derevi might be doing is untapping some looters that tap to use their ability and then untap to draw and discard more cards. Derevi has other nice applications in the deck as well. There's other creature cards that he can untap, like Arcanist the Omnipotent, and others, yeah, Jace's Archivist, this type of thing. And in concert with Illusionist Bracers, actually, some of that stuff can get pretty wild. You'll be drawing and discarding tons of cards. So another good way that Derevi works is with the bounce lands. It's a simple thing, but these lands that produce 2 mana, you can gain a little extra advantage off of Derevi with those. Yeah, that's pretty much it for Derevi. I can tell you that playing against the Red-White Angel, I forget her name, aggressive girl, she does a pretty good job of coming in and just tapping that girl down. My friend was pretty unhappy with me when I was doing that, but that's what you get for playing against Derevi, I guess. But anyway, moving into the deck, I'll start out by talking about the actual engine of the deck, what makes this deck click. And as I said before, it's the looters. So some of the different looters are Sinbad, Cephalid Broker, I mentioned before. We have Kiora's Follower to untap different looters, which Kiora's Follower is great in this deck because it not only does that, but it also functions as a mana ramp option. Jace's Archivist is probably the best looter effect in the deck, especially in concert with like Prophet of Kruphix or Seedborn Muse, and even if you get an Illusionist Bracer in the mix, you're going to be windfalling like a ton, and as you'll see later, filling up the graveyard and discarding these cards and drawing these cards is going to play right into your hands. Even if you're getting your opponents a fresh start, you know, either way, maybe they're losing some good cards, maybe they're gaining better cards, but you're the one who's going to benefit in the end with all of this windfall stuff going on. So some of the other looters are Fat Adias Seer, one that I was shocked to see was a looter. It's a green card. It's a green Merfolk Looter, basically, sort of similar. I guess I will note on the topic of Fat Adias Seer, her and Sinbad are horrible looking cards, but I've drawn 6+ lands in several turns with Sinbad, actually, in a couple games. So they're better than they look, especially with the way this deck is built. Sphinx of Lost Truths is another nice, quick way. I rarely ever kick this guy just because I love dumping cards into my graveyard. So I just play him straight up for 5 mana as a quick way to cycle through my cards, fill up that graveyard, and keep discarding stuff. So closing up with the looter aspect, a card that I recently put in is Hermit Druid. And you might be like, whoa, yikes, calm down, man. Are you trying to like dump your whole graveyard, your whole deck into your graveyard and like do some crazy game-ending turn all at once? You'll be happy to know that I'm not. I play many basic lands in this deck. So Hermit Druid is just there as a way to make my graveyard bigger, not do anything too over the top, but Yeah, it's basically a looter on steroids. And the last card I'll mention is Recycle. This is a bit of a powerhouse green enchantment that you may not have heard of. It's ancient and has really wacky, funny art on it. But yeah, this card is kind of a head scratcher at first. You're like, how is this going to be good? Am I going to be losing cards? Am I going to be gaining cards? Am I going to be able to keep up? Well, I can tell you that this card is great when you're in top deck mode, and especially in this deck, which besides loving looting and discarding cards, which this card actually has packed into it, because there are so many small creatures in the deck, you can tend to rifle through your deck, like play a 2-cast spell, draw a card. Oh, I drew another 2-cast spell. Cast that, draw another card, play my other 3-caster in my hand, draw another card. Because the mana curve is generally pretty low, the deck can really rifle through itself with Recycle. So the next part of the deck is I talked about the engine of the deck, so now I want to talk about the cards that benefit from the engine. So we're doing all this looting, cool stuff, bro, like what are we going to do with it? So here's what we're going to do with it. Here's how we're going to take advantage of all the looting. Oh, there were two more looters that I forgot to mention. I had them separate because they're both tutor cards, Fauna Shaman and Survival of the Fittest. Actually both looter cards, and Survival can really go loot, 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 loot for every green mana you have in a turn, but these are definitely more powerful cards that can help you search up the key answers that you need. So yes, back to the cards that benefit from the engine of the deck. Some of the nice cards are Confessor. I guess Confessor and Spirit Cairn are the two cards in the deck that benefit when you're discarding cards. So you're looting cards, obviously you're discarding cards. These are the two cards in the deck, and it's rare to find these cards in Magic, but I found two of them here. I had to dig deep, but I found a couple. They're both white cards. So yeah, with Confessor we can gain some life. He's nothing too crazy, but he'll usually gain a good amount of life in a game, and pad your life total so that you're not getting totally stomped out before you can really get your thing going. And then Spirit Cairn is really like this card. We're looting all the time, so we can really, I guess in the same boat as Confessor, protect our life total with these little 1/1 spirits that can block the bigger creatures and keep them off our case. Lots of I will say there's a low white source count in this deck, but definitely lots of flyers from that card. So some other stuff I have are Arrogant Worm, actually, just straight up a little madness in the deck. Why not just gain basically a free card when you discard? Another two that are nice and do similar things are Garruk's Hoard and Future Sight. Both of these cards work very well with the looters, because with the looters you're able to constantly change the top card of your deck. So you can, if you have Garruk's Hoard in play, for example, you can dig away from a land and find a creature which you can then cast. In addition, Garruk's Hoard is really nice because, like I said before, the deck plays a lot of cheap creatures. So somebody asked me the other night when I was playing at a local store, why Garruk's Hoard? Like, okay, he's a big green beefy guy, but like I don't get why his ability is good. And I explained, like, especially in this deck, because of the cheap creatures that the deck plays, you can, in concert with the looting, i.e. the ability to change the top card of your deck and get lands out of your way, you can rifle through small creatures. So you can be like, cast this 2-drop on top of my deck, loot this land away. Oh, there's a 3-drop, cast this, and do a bunch of that in a turn. And as you know, Commander's a format of tons of mana. So once you get the mana rolling, you can just like poop your deck out with Garruk's Hoard. Nice effect that works really well with the looting. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm standing on some shirts actually just to get myself up high enough, so I'm a little tipsy. But anyway, Psychosis Crawler is a card that benefits from drawing cards with all those looting. So we're going to be making our opponents lose a lot of life, and I'll talk about a combination later where we're drawing just really more than just looting 3 or 4 cards a turn, but drawing up butt ton of cards and making each of our opponents lose a lot of life with Psychosis Crawler. The last card in this category I'll talk about is Abundance. Yeah, when you're drawing all those cards, and discarding cards, of course, why not take advantage of that? Like, if you're looting 3 or 4 cards plus a turn, why not choose whether each of them is a land or a spell? In the early game, you can get the mana you need to ramp up. In the late game, you can get the gas that you need to close out. So the next, okay, this is the same section of the deck actually, but this is the graveyard part. So these cards also benefit from the looter ability. We have stuff like Ancestors Chosen. We're filling up our graveyard so we can gain a ton of life. We have stuff like, let's see here, Genesis, Tracker's Instinct, Vengevine, and Spitting Image, all cards that love to be discarded and just live in the graveyard. Genesis in particular, the ability to tutor through your graveyard is especially nice in this deck because it usually turns into like this big of a pile, and it's like Genesis is now like kind of like a tutor card because the zone that he has to pick from is just so full of cards. Sun Titan is another one, filling up that graveyard, lots of options and targets, and by turn 6 when you're ready to cast them, you'll almost always have something to bring back. And the last one I'll mention is Ghoul Tree, which, yeah, for creatures in your graveyard. So this deck just plays predominantly creatures, and as you know, it loots a ton. So Ghoul Tree, little 1 mana 10/10. Seems like a no-brainer. Okay, now I want to talk about the finishers of the deck. I've been talking about a lot of synergy stuff, a little bit of mucking around, kind of like engineering these cool little interactions, which is personally my favorite part of Commander. To a fault, sometimes I go overboard with subtle synergy when I should go more for raw power. But yeah, this was one of the problems that the deck had initially, and this is why I put this deck in my Commander box and left it there for like a year or 2 years, just because it wasn't fun to play, because it would always get stomped. It wasn't competitive enough. So what I've done now is added new ways to finish and cards to give the deck more punch and more size, rather than just playing small 1/1s and 2/2s that tap and have these little dirtily abilities. We're gonna cut a lot of that crap out, and we're gonna bring in cards that are bigger, better, but still fit with the theme of the deck. So in that vein, these are the finishers of the deck. First up, I have Prime Speaker Zagana. Now, not exactly a finisher by herself, now is she? She can certainly find you a whole lot of stuff that you'll probably be able to put together and finish a game. However, this is the card that I wanted to talk about with Psychosis Crawler, because this is actually I consider this one of the game-ending combos, because it can do that, it has the capacity to do that. Won't always, but has definitely the capacity to end the game. So in concert with Psychosis Crawler, Prime Speaker Zagana can draw you just a metric butt ton of cards, with actually Boneyard, Bone Horde, Boneyard Worm, and Splinter Fright. All creatures and equipment that scale to creatures in graveyards. So we are looting a ton, and these 3 cards, Boneyard Worm, Bone Horde, Boneyard Worm, and Splinter Fright, are bread and butter as far as finishing the game goes, because the whole thing we're trying to do is just turn that graveyard into a giant stack of mostly creatures. So these guys are going to be absolutely huge. They're going to be 20-20, 30-30. You'd be surprised how quickly this happens too. I'm not talking about a 2-hour drawn-out game. I'm talking about, you know, a reasonably short game where these guys get big in a hurry. So anyway, any of these 3 cards here that scale to this massive creatures in graveyard size is going to be drawing absolutely a ton of cards with Prime Speaker Zagana. So let's say you got a 25-25 Splinter Fight in play after you've done a lot of looting and really filled your graveyard up. Maybe your opponents have played a few Wraths and filled their graveyards up too, which, as a matter of fact, would only work for Bone Horde. So let's say we're using Bone Horde for the sake of example. But and you've got 25, 30, let's say 30 creatures in all graveyards. Well, Prime Speaker Zagana comes out, she looks around and says, you know, hey, who's the biggest creature out here? Finds Boneyard Worm, this towering 30/30, and says, okay, cool, I'll draw 31 cards. And with Psychosis Crawler out, your opponents are not going to be too happy about that, because they're all going to be taking 31 points of life loss. So as you can see, that is certainly a way to finish the game. Another way to finish the game is any of these three really big graveyard scalers that I talked about, in concert with Overwhelming Stampede. Just an insane card. Typically it's going to be giving +10/+10 or +15/+15 and trample to your entire army. So again, as you can imagine, and I mentioned how many creatures we play in this deck and how rapidly we spit them out, an overrun is going to just be, it's going to be curtains for our opponents most of the time. The last finisher that I have is Kessig Cagebreakers, which is my favorite card in the deck, aside from Merfolk Looter, I should say. He was looking at me weird. He was like, brah, I see you. Merfolk Looter. But secondly is Kessig Cagebreakers, which again is doing this scale to the creatures and graveyards thing. So he's going to bring attacking wolves into play with him when he attacks, and usually the first turn, because we'll often have a Lightning Greaves out, which we've searched up with Stoneforge Mystic, which in itself is in turn searchable by Survival of the Fittest and Fauna Shaman. Will consistently have a Lightning Greaves out. It's the best equipment in the deck by far, just making all of your looters fast, and everything else that it does is just good. But anyway, crazy tangents aside, Kessig Cagebreakers will often come in, and the very first turn he's swinging right away before your opponents have any time to do stuff like Sorcery Speed, board wipes like Wrath of God, or Damnation or anything like that. He's going to come in right away and he's going to swing, and he's going to bring 2/2 wolves with him equal to the massive creatures in graveyard size that I talked about. So this guy is another way to finish the game, and he's actually my go-to win condition just because of it's him by himself. The deck, as long as the deck's doing what it's doing and it's built to and it does every game, he comes down and he is always going to have enough damage to take out one player at the table, if they're not prepared to deal with him right here, right now, you know, or you're dead. So yeah, that's the finishers. That's a way that this deck has been improved a lot from what it used to be. It used to be dirtily and small, now it's big and bad and can finish, hopefully. So the next section of the deck that I want to talk about is the mana ramp. So every commander deck needs mana ramp. I think we've got a couple cards in here that work special in this deck, but generally it's just good good mana ramp. It's creature based because again we want to be filling our graveyard with creatures for cards like Kessig Cagebreakers, Splinter Fright, and so on. So it's all creature based, except for one of these, which is Far Wanderings. So Far Wanderings, Krosan Restorer, and well, actually Burnished Heart, Seedborn Muse, and Prophet of Kruphix are all ramp cards that we have that actually work especially well in this particular deck. Far Wanderings and Krosan Restorer work on the threshold mechanic to give us a super duper added extra bonus when we get our graveyard to a size of 7, which happens lightning quick in this deck. We have Burnished Heart, which, if you think about it, is actually perfect for the deck because we need to ramp, as you know, and we need to play more creatures, and we need to put creatures in our graveyard. So Burnished Heart goes right to the graveyard, ups that threshold count, gives an extra wolf for Kessig Cagebreakers, all of that stuff. Minor little thing, but just a reason why I would pick Burnished Heart in this deck over Skyshroud Claim or anything else like that. And these last two ramp spells that interact particularly well in this deck are Prophet of Kruphix and Seedborn Muse. These cards are absolutely insane. Prophet of Kruphix is the best card in Commander, and it shines especially well in this deck because not only do you get free turns, oh, I passed the turn, it's your turn, now I'm going to take a turn. Oh, now it's his turn, I'm going to take a turn. Now it's her turn, I'm going to take a turn. So Prophet of Kruphix is absolutely insane, and as I said, untapping those looters in this deck is an awesome added bonus that she has. So definitely stuff like Arcanist the Omnipotent also comes into play. So we're not just gaining extra mana and having the opportunity to play more creatures on our opponent's turn, we're also getting to do our abilities 3 and 4 times over. And Seedborn Muse does the same thing, but has the added benefit of untapping non-creature permanents. In some decks this might come into play, but in this particular deck it's not too much of a thing, since we're playing mostly creatures. That's about it. I have Oracle of Moldiah, that's the last one I'll mention. Oracle of Moldiah is absolutely really good in this deck for the same reason that Garruk's Hoard is good and Future Sight is good, because with the looters we can constantly change that top card of our deck, and it's, I mean, we're gonna be getting those 2 lands a turn just every turn consistently, because we can dig for them by switching the top card with looters. Okay, so the second to last section of the deck that I'll talk about is the utility cards. Yeah, these are cards that didn't fit into any other category. I've got Witchbane Orb, which protects us from stuff that was hurting me in particular in my main play group. Stuff like Bajuka Bog and this newer black enchantment creature dude who's like 2 black for a 2/2. He comes in and just exiles your whole graveyard. Witchbane Orb will also stop that. I'm not worried about the Scavenging Ooze type incremental stuff too much. I'm worried about the, hey man, exile your whole graveyard. Sorry, are you screwed? And then you're like, just gotta start over. Just gotta start over from scratch. So Witchbane Orb is a nice way to get through that. And I'll talk about one special way later that we have of a little bit of added reach towards grabbing this card into our hand beyond just naturally drawing it. Some other stuff we have, like I said, Stoneforge Mystic to search up those key equipment cards. Lightning Greaves and Illusionist Bracers are bonkers in this deck, so we want to find those as much as possible. And again, Stoneforge is tutorable with Fauna Shaman and Survival of the Fittest, so if we draw any of those 3 cards, we're finding the equipment we need to get things rolling pretty good. Teferi, Temporal Archmage, the Planeswalker, I dropped a little money on this guy recently. Yeah, looked at his second ability and went, duh! So he's pretty good in there. We've got Dauntless Escort to protect our team from wrath effects and damnation, this sort of thing. Works especially well with Genesis because we can use him to protect our team, and then we can just get him back the very next turn with Genesis and just pretty much say goodnight to Wrathing Me for the rest of the game. Some other stuff we've got is, this is a very interesting card, Pulsemage Advocate. You may have seen it in your playgroup if you have creative people around you, because they will probably find this card because it's really political and fun and totally what Commander's all about. I'm going to give you some stuff, but I'm also going to get this thing that's even better. So, like, you can make friends, but also get your thing going too. Pulsemage Advocate, just great for digging up Kessid Cagebreakers to finish out the game, digging up a Prime Speaker Sagana to just go big and draw a bunch of cards. Just get that key critter that you need, and as you know, as the game goes on and on and on in Commander, those graveyards of your opponents are getting bigger, so you can give them their crappy lands back, and you don't have to actually give them any gas back with the Pulsemage Advocate. Yeah, the last one I'll mention is Loaming Shaman. This is our out to decking ourselves. So if we go a little bit too crazy with Hermit Druid with an Illusionist Bracers on it, with a Prophet of Kruphix out, activating him every turn, which, if you play this deck, if for some reason you're crazy enough to sleeve out this deck and try it out, pump the brakes on that stuff. Don't go too crazy because you will run into trouble. But that's what this Loaming Shaman is here for, is to shuffle back whatever cards you want back into your deck from your graveyard for when you get into those situations. Oh, and the second category of the utility section is utility that works as removal. So we have another Madness card in Circular Logic. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful counterspell in this deck. Super efficient, and it's pretty much a hard counter all the time, and it's pretty much a free card since you can basically say, hey, I'm going to draw a free card using the loot ability. Austere Command, I have found is probably the second best board wipe in Commander, in my experience. Cyclonic Rift being the best, but this is very good just because of the modes. You can choose exactly what you need to deal with now, including certain non-creature permanents. You can keep yourself in a favorable position while taking down the key stuff that's hindering you from your opponents. We have Mystic Snake, which is a nice counter spell. Yeah, just, I don't know, it's a creature, doesn't have any particular play in this deck. We can get it back to our hand maybe, but it's just an all-around nice card. Cyclonic Rift we have because we're playing blue and we're just, yeah, we're D-heads like that, so we got to do that. Keteric Leviathan actually does very close to the same thing as Cyclonic Rift, but again, one of those cards that just loves getting dumped into the graveyard, and we can use his ability later. The last card I'll mention in the utility is Sylvok Replica. This is a nice way to deal with artifacts and enchantments on the surface, but when you look deeper in this deck, you'll see a lot more. This guy is, let's see, he's got some cool stuff that he can do. You can Sun Titan him back turn after turn for dealing with multiple artifacts and enchantments. You can use Genesis to get him back into your hand, and you can actually use another card that I'll tell you about in a minute when we get to the land section. The one I mentioned before that also works good with Witchbane Orb. So he's got some nice play in this deck, being a creature and being able to put himself into the graveyard zone. He can be reused that way. The last stuff that I'll talk about with this deck are the lands. So it's pretty straightforward. I've got colors that I need and some basic lands, and got the cycling lands, all three of them for my colors. The 1-mana cycling lands makes sense in this deck, right? We want to play the cycling lands. We're playing a cycling deck, essentially. Looting, not cycling, I guess there's a difference, but whatever, screw you, that's what we're doing. Cephalid Coliseum is the next one in that same vein of looting / cycling through our deck. We've got, we hit Threshold very fast, and this card's just a no-brainer in the deck because, yeah, it's just a nice triple loot effect. There you go. You have to take a little bit of damage for using it, but hey, it's worth the cost. Azorius Chancery. I wanted to talk about all three of the bounce lands here. I talked about them at the very start of the video, how Derevi can untap them for added value. That's it. That's what I wanted to say. Windswept Heath. This speaks for all the fetch lands in the deck. This deck has quite a few fetch lands because remember, Threshold. We're trying to fill up our graveyard. We're trying to make it big, and fetch lands are a good way to do that. Core Haven, one that I put in recently. Just a nice utility card that can deal with a giant... let's see, can this deal with Eldrazi's? Yeah, I guess so. Unless it has lightning greaves on it. That would suck. But yeah, it's pretty good. It works, does its job. It's in the white color, so I figured I'd try it out, and haven't used it yet. So we'll see how it goes. The last card in the deck that I want to talk about is the really cool land, Academy Ruins. This is the one that works with not Psychosis Crawler, Witchbane Orb, and Sylvok Replica. These are two nice targets for it that you can get back, put on top of your deck, and draw into your hand. Say you need to protect your graveyard because you're playing some D-heads who all have Bajuka Bogs in their deck, as they well should if they're black players. Very nice card, and it's very good to have graveyard and hate on hand in Commander. But yeah, if you happen to get your Witchbane Orb milled / looted, you can get it back and then cast it and protect yourself from stuff like Bajuka Bog. Same thing with Sylvok Replica. Play him, sack him, destroy something, put him back on top, rinse, repeat. Not the craziest combo you've ever heard of, but it is a nice repeatable way to deal with enchantments that are thorns in your sides. So that wraps up my deck. I hope you enjoyed me rapping about it, / rambling on and on. Regardless, rambling, I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, that's all I have to say about the deck. It's really fun. It was the first Commander deck that I ever built, so it holds a special place in my heart. God, I'm such a nerd. But yeah, totally, that's the deck, and I hope you check it out. Thanks for watching this video. Check us out, Dotobird Commander, on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to this awesome channel. We've got Commander gameplays in your face, and we've got other stuff like deck interviews, which are really cool. I sit down and talk to wonderful players who are playing awesome decks with cool interactions that I've never thought of and might be enlightening to you and inspire you in your own deck building. So check out the channel for that type of content and stay tuned, we've got more awesome stuff for you. Thanks for watching.